guys, didn't see you there. For my topic, it is homelessness in the 1970s and 1980s. The large number of homeless people started in around the 1970s. This was due to the factor of mental health issues in the United States. Many of the people who were homeless were suffering with mental illness or things such as substance abuse, and in some cases both, which is really quite sad. For other people with substance abuse, it kind of ties in the factor of AIDS, which is another topic, through potential sharing of needles, because most people who were homeless were abusing drugs and did have substance abuse problems. The drug situation in the United States was also very slim at that time, and laws were made to prevent further drug epidemics from happening. However, it didn't really stop, and those who were caught using drugs would have no way out and essentially would repeat the cycle of being in jail and then out of jail and then abusing drugs, and it just never really stopped, and it was quite sad. And when they were out of jail, most of the time they were homeless, and it's really quite sad. And during the 1980s, approximately 1.5 million people were homeless, which means that 3% of the people in the United States between 1985 and 1990 were without homes. The main factors of homelessness at that time were mental illness or the lack of services and needed services, because around this time in the 1970s, the mentally ill were released from the mental hospitals that they were in due to social services being cut completely. Substance abuse was also a main factor, and they did not receive any services either. And then it was just kind of the drug issue in the United States. Jobs that don't pay a living wage are also a big thing, and one thing was that the economy at this time was not helpful with helping people get a job, and having several recessions at that time was not have people to make money. Many of the homeless people have been let into situations that cause them to be homeless. One big thing is Vietnam. There were a lot of troops. I'll get into that later, but they didn't have housing or certain amounts of money that they needed to survive. Some other things were childcare systems letting people out when they are above the age of 18 because they were no longer children. And like I said previously, the cutting of social programs will cause a lot of issues and will cause a lot of people to be homeless because they're not receiving the services that they need. And without things like food stamps or the ability to get an efficient enough job and to make money is one of the things that will cause people to end up homeless on the street. Also around this time, unemployment reaches over 7%, which is really quite awful. Around this time, it was mostly men who were homeless, although a large portion were men. Women and children and employed families and sometimes unemployed people were still victim to being homeless. Some will not even have a home if they do still have a job. Homelessness is seen as a major issue when children do not have a home or an amount of money to keep them going in school, or in reality, just being kids. It's like growing up without anything. As seen in the picture that is shown right here, it is a family eating Thanksgiving dinner on a bench, which is really quite sad because, like I said previously, they can't really be the family that they're supposed to be because they can't afford a home. And they're not doing this willingly. They don't really look that happy. They are clearly going through a lot. I'm gonna play a video that shows a little bit of the history of homelessness.
In the 60s, Kennedy instituted the Mental Health Centers Act, which released patients from mental institutions to live in society a little bit more normally and give them help through these mental health centers. But the centers weren't funded, so it created a class of homelessness in the United States. In the 1980s, homelessness became the societal problem that it is today. And Reagan played a part in that with his cuts to social programs and an economy falling. In response to this, Reagan signed the McKinney-Vento Act, which created this federal overseer group called the U.S. Interagency Council on the Homeless. In the 90s, there was an increase in soup kitchens and homeless shelters, and it kept growing. Even though the economy was booming, it didn't help the numbers of homelessness. They kept increasing. In the 90s, the economy boomed, and there was lots of services created to help the homeless, but the homeless numbers didn't decline. In 2008, the economy crashed, and Obama decided to give a lot of money to help the homeless and focusing on more permanent housing.
So like I said previously, one of the reasons for such a large amount of homelessness in the country is due to Vietnam and the war veterans. They're not getting the help that they had needed, and Vietnam veterans have suffered through an exorbitant amount of PTSD and other mental health related issues, and most families would be so overwhelmed with what's going on that sometimes they would kick their children out of the house or their husband out of the house or something like that. The Vietnam War and the Vietnam War veterans are clearly direct impacts, and some war veterans from Vietnam are homeless because of, like I said previously, the lack of GI benefits, which means that they did not have enough money to, they didn't have money that the government said that they would have provided, and a lot of the soldiers were injured, and it was really, really difficult to find a job that would take you when, number one, you didn't have enough money for it, just to even qualify, or that you had an injury, not being able to walk or not being able to do certain things. It would be extremely difficult, which is awful on top of everything that they've gone through. Mental health is a big thing when it comes to Vietnam. Drug addictions, PTSD, anxiety, depression, those are just a few to name. And due to the 70s bringing deinstitutionalization of everybody, and especially soldiers, the United States had an extreme lack of care when it came to our soldiers. Many ended up on the streets because they were ignored, and many of them had led themselves into drug addiction. Vietnam and homelessness, both, although they are technically combined together, they also have this kind of impact on each other just in general. They're both kind of flaws of the United States, and they impact the United States still to this day. Although the Vietnam War is over, homelessness is still not over and is still occurring to this day. Currently, there's a lot more support for both than ever before, like support groups or homeless shelters being actually good and not bad. And it's overall just much more providing than it was previously before in the 70s and the 80s. The following video I'm going to show is about a Vietnam veteran who finally gets his home after being homeless ever since the war, pretty much.
Veteran says that he found a safe and affordable home. News Channel 11's Josh Smith found out that he did that with help from the Veterans Administration at Mountain Home in Johnson City.
Mighty grateful, let me tell you, mighty grateful. I was so grateful when I came here.
James Mac McFarland says he arrived in Johnson City homeless, on his way to sobering up after years on the street, confined to a wheelchair.
Staying drunk, finding, panhandling, doing whatever you could to get your next drink. and save it till the end of the day so that, you know, when dark come on, you could drink it and lay down, or in my case, park and sleep.
He says the Veterans Administration brought him to the VA Medical Center at Mountain Home from another state through its Homeless Veterans Program, the first step in healing from the physical and mental wounds of 2 tours in Vietnam.
Those memories, no matter what, will never go away. But my motto in life is, yesterday is gone. There ain't a fool thing in the world you can do to change it. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. The next minute is not guaranteed. So what we have left is today. Make the most of your time here on earth.
For the past 15 years, Mac McFarland says he's been off the streets with help from the VA.
They gave me a leg up on the list. You know, heaven only knows how many people are waiting for affordable housing. And with the economy being the way it is,
he says he's grateful for that help and the gift of a simple life.
Long as I got a warm, dry place to sleep, food to eat, you know, and company, and a way to pay my bills, that's all I care about. If I can make those simple goals each and every day, then I have made a success out of what these folks have helped me with.
With people who were a direct cause towards the homelessness epidemic, it would be presidents such as Kennedy and Ronald Reagan, but I would like to focus more on Reagan because he did do the social cuts, as I've said before, and it really did cause a lot of issues for homeless people. And also Reagan had caused several recessions and different economic issues to the point where a lot of people were losing jobs and losing a lot of money, and there was $2 trillion added to national debt. Like, that's crazy. So obviously inflation would go up and other things such. Also, Reagan had cut taxes on the wealthy and then essentially making the rich richer and the poor poorer, which was not good, especially if you were already homeless. Homelessness has been a thing since the 1600s in the United States, but it really began in the 1870s at the end of the Civil War, and not to mention the large amount of homelessness during the Great Depression. The U.S. homelessness was around its all-time high that it had been before in the 1980s, which is pretty crazy.